when we do. Good evening. I'm Richard Doré, and I'd like to welcome you to the Harvard Church and Let's Talk Live. Tonight's guest is Tara Nierenhausen, and she is one of the founders of Community's Child, which I had always thought was a national program, but apparently it was born and bred right here in Lomita. And one of the things that they've really done with Community's Child is that a lot of programs, but two that we're going to talk about tonight of considerable importance is they have a shelter for homeless women with children, which is kind of a rarity. If you remember when I had Harold Hartwell on recently, we had Lydia House for the Long Beach Rescue Mission, but that was basically just for homeless women. But this is including the children. And then they also have what's called healthy bags, which we're going to get into that later on. But anyway, looks like Tara was given a calling, and back in the early 2000s, let's say, she and her husband came back from Canada. She's a Canadian, from Vancouver, and to help her mother-in-law. And that kind of prompted you to do a lot of stuff.
It did. It did. First, thank you for having me here tonight.
Oh, sure.
It's really an honor. And I think, as I was telling you, the story of Community's Child is really a story of faith.
Yes.
And it really is a story about a calling from God.
Yes.
I came to California because my husband lived in Redondo Beach. We
Yes.
were living in Vancouver, Canada, and my husband's mom had polio as a child, and
Yes.
she developed something later called post-polio syndrome, which is quite painful, and she needed assistance. So we sold our home in Vancouver, Canada, came here and thought we would be here for about 5 years providing assistance. That
Yes.
was early 2002, so
Okay.
it's been almost 20 years now.
Okay.
I do like to work. I have a background in social work and special education. So when we came here, along with helping his mom, I wanted a job. So I applied for jobs, and I actually secured a job with United Way as one of their directors.
Okay.
And but I'd also applied for a job as at a crisis maternity shelter just over in Harbor City. And I had gone there to tell them, thank you so much for the opportunity, but I had taken this job. When I got there, the board hadn't been informed or forgot that I was coming for the
Okay.
interview. So God in his infinite wisdom had me sitting with these 6 women that were either pregnant or who had just given birth
Yeah.
to these children. And these 6 women were so incredibly lost, broken, afraid, just really not in a good place. I got to spend about an hour with those women before the interview happened. Long story short is I never told that board that I had taken a job with the United Way.
Yeah.
I did the interview. I went home to my husband and said, I really think this is where God wants me to be.
Yeah.
So we prayed on it because our goal was to buy a house here.
Sure.
And houses in California are very expensive.
Yes, I know.
And the job at the shelter was only paying $12 an hour compared to the United Way job, which was $120,000 a year.
Whoa.
Yeah, it was a big sacrifice. But I really felt, and my husband felt, that this is where God wanted
Yeah.
me to be. And my husband's an engineer, so he didn't
Okay.
he was going to be able to find work. So I went in and started the job as their program director. I quickly learned that I didn't know a lot about how systems worked in the United States,
Yeah.
being from Canada. So I started taking classes. I started at the Justice Institute and then went on to Cal State and took
Fullerton, right?
Fullerton,
Yeah.
yes, and took the nonprofit management program. I was at that crisis maternity shelter for about 4 years, worked there for 4 years. And while I was there, I became familiar with something called the West Coast Maternity Association, which is an affiliation under the Right to Life League. So it's a Christian affiliation with about 28 crisis maternity shelters.
Okay.
We all were working very hard to make sure that pregnant women that were homeless because of abandonment, abuse, neglect, had a really safe, faith-based place to come, a place to get to know the Lord, a place to have lots of nurturing love, have really healthy babies, really good outcomes.
Okay.
And that was all wonderful. We were all achieving those objectives. However, the nature of a crisis maternity shelter is that when the babies reach 3 months of age, it's time for the women to transition out. Problem was, at the end of the time that I was there and I'm transitioning out the women, the last 5 I worked with, I couldn't find any appropriate housing for. The last one that I worked with, who had worked so hard to give up, she had actually been working as a stripper, had been taking drugs. She had totally turned her life over to Christ. She had worked so hard, and here I found myself driving her back to the home where I knew she was going to be living with a woman that was doing stripping, where there was drugs.
Yeah, sure.
I felt like I was delivering her back into the hands of
Sure.
the enemy. I made a promise that day that I would never drop another woman off in a place like that, and through prayer, I had heard God saying, go build a house, go build them a home. I had no idea how I was going to do that, but I knew that I needed to do it because it just wasn't enough. These women needed a couple of years someplace where they could stabilize to break all of the chains that were binding them, right? You know, Jesus says that he came to break the chains that bind and to set the captives free, and they need to be set free from so many different abuse issues, abandonment, drugs, alcohol, so many things. So I'm a bit of a talker. So I got out there and started talking to anyone that would kind of listen to the cause. Back then in 2004 and 5, many people didn't know that right here in the South Bay, we had 34,000 homeless women and children. Yeah.
Wow.
And people go, well, you know, we're not that big. But the reason we had it here is they can hide better. They can go to the beach. They can go to parks. They can stay in their cars.
Sure.
Some of them were living in garages, right? There was different places they could hide. And they were hiding because if the Department of Social Services found out they were homeless, there was a pretty good chance that their children were going to be apprehended.
Of course.
Right? And these women had already gone through so much loss, that was too much. Anyhow, it took a couple years, but actually there was seven of us Christians that got together, decided we were just going to find a way to do this for the Lord, and we did. By 2005, we formed Community's Child.
Yes.
We managed to, by let's say the end of 2007, raise about $350,000 to $360,000. We actually managed to buy a small house in Lomita. It was, I think, the associate pastor's small residence for Calvary Assembly of God.
Okay, yeah.
But they weren't using it anymore. They didn't, and so the church was kind enough to actually take the money that we had for the down payment, and then they used that. They held the mortgage for us, which was great. That was absolutely great. But it was a really small house, and we needed a much bigger place to house the women and children. So we managed to get all the plans and everything done, and they started ripping the house down. So I had to come out of that house, and I went to the pastor next door and said, I really need a little office, right? I need a little office so that I can write grants and get the funding to provide.
This is Pastor John.
This is Pastor John over at Calvary Assembly of God. And Pastor John did give me an office. It came with a little hook, and the little hook was that, okay, Tara, but when people come from the community that have a need, I know that you got a background in social work, so could you please talk to them and see what you can do to help them? And I was like, sure, it's what I do anyhow. That grew quite big, but I'll get to that in a minute because I want to go back to the shelter. The office that he gave me, to actually access it, you had to go into the main sanctuary. It was just a little to the right of the cross of Christ, this little door, and it used to be where they would change into their choir garb. What I really liked about that was the fact that I had been told when I was taking the nonprofit management at Fullerton, I was told no matter what, don't tell them you're Christian. Because if you tell the big foundations that you're Christian, they're not going to fund you.
Sure.
So I had been praying on that because I know what the Word of God says. God says that if I do that and if I'm lukewarm, it's going to spew me out. I didn't want to be spewed out, and I'd been praying. So the Lord answered that prayer by giving me that office.
Okay.
And how that worked was that every foundation that I wrote to, Almas and Weingart, they always send out a program officer that wants to come and check out your site. And so they had to come in through the sanctuary, see the cross of Christ, and come into the door. And the first thing they would say to me is, Christian, huh?
Yes.
And I would say yes. But also, God gave me a way to speak to them. If God's going to give you something and call you to something, He's going to equip you in every way.
Sure.
So He told me, talk to them about the woman at the well. So I did. A lot of we'll call maybe people who don't understand Christianity and faith have sort of preconceived ideas about what Christianity is, and I think it's very hard-lined. So I got to tell them that actually what it meant was these women were like the woman at the well that Jesus met who was lost.
Yeah.
She was incredibly lost, and she was running a life that was very self-destructive, and all He did was meet her exactly where she was at and give her a better way of life.
Yeah.
And that is all that we wanted to do for the women coming to Community's Child. That worked so well that the Ralph M. Parsons Foundation gave us $125,000.
Oh, nice.
Amundsen gave $50,000, and so did the Weingart Foundation. So we were able to get started on all the renovations that we needed for that shelter. And so we did, and that shelter now has, there's so many, over 250 women and children have come through that shelter program.
Well, the shelter, opened in 2006, right?
No, it opened in 2008. It was going to
2008.
It was going to open at the end of 2007, but
that's right. But
I shattered my shoulder, so we opened a little bit late. And it's very structured. The program there is very, very structured. There's no drugs, there's no alcohol, there's actual curfews, there's 12 pages of rules and regulations, and it's just stuff that most of us would take for granted. But when you haven't had any structure and you haven't had any parenting and you've been living on the streets, it's really important that you have that structure because it helps them to form healthy lifestyles, but it also helps them to feel really secure. Also the children. So along with that, there's counseling, Christian counseling, Bible studies. There is parenting classes, domestic violence education and support, a lot of program with it. It is mandatory for the women to go to school. So if they don't have their grade 12, we're going to do a fast track for a GED, and then we're going to get them into college or vocational training school. The success rate of that program is amazing. It's unheard of. We do receive kind of some ongoing funding from the Ralph M. Parsons Foundation, even though we're Christian, because our success rate is so high. The women, out of the women that complete the program, it's a 2-year program, we want them all to complete, but out of the ones that complete, we have a 100% success rate. And by that I mean they have further educations, they have sustainable employment, they have long-term housing. Our first graduate is just finishing up her law degree at Cal State, not at Cal State,
Berkeley.
Berkeley.
Excellent.
We've got women that have degrees in social work, nurses, teachers.
A lot have become homeowners too.
Yeah, three of them have become homeowners. So
Yeah.
it's really a great program, and
Good.
the children just shine.
Yeah.
The children start exceeding at school and get really high grades. So it's a wonderful, wonderful program, and we're just very happy. It was so impactful that we actually had a woman who wants to remain anonymous, but she worked for the school board as supervisor for one of the school boards, and she came down and actually paid the entire mortgage and the renovation costs off for the shelter, because she was saying, I see the impact that you're having with the families and the children, and whatever you're doing, I want you to keep on doing it, and if you can, expand.
That's nice.
So that was probably one of the nicest compliments. And it's also just kind of a treasure because we are called Community's Child, and the community has really come on board, right? Different churches, different organizations. We have lots of opportunities for babysitting, tutoring, teaching women how to cook, how to knit, donating, doing odd things at the shelter. So it's really become kind of a community gem as well. So while that shelter was being built, we'll go back to when Pastor John gave me that little office, and asked me, when somebody comes to the church, would you please help them out? In the first year, while they were building that shelter, over 120 families, local families, came to that church looking for assistance. So one of the first things we did is we opened up the pantry again at Calvary Assembly of God, which is still running to this day.
Okay.
And because the church, most churches during the day, Monday through Friday, have classroom space, right? And over there they have gymnasium space too. So because these families were coming, I didn't want them just to get food, right? There was a lot more things they needed, like English as second language, pre-vocational programs, parenting classes. So Pastor John allowed me to use the classes to start working with the families, because you can't house everybody, but you can teach them, like I said, you can teach them how to fish, right? And that's what we wanted to do. So we started with 120 families. By about 5 years ago, we were up to 1,200 families.
And you service not only Lomita, but the general South Bay in this area,
Harbor City,
Torrance.
And now, since we've kind of moved, we opened a community center, because when we got to 1,200...
Oh, the one at 190th and Crenshaw.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Right. When we got to, 1,200, Pastor John said, Tara, it's time to go.
Yeah. Yeah, you needed your own.
We're kind of outgrowing the place here.
You're outgrowing.
Which was totally fair, and I'll be forever grateful for him for allowing us to use it for so long. And then we were incredibly blessed, because we actually had another donor that was watching us.
Yeah.
And it was one of our volunteers. So you never know who your volunteers are.
Really?
And one of my volunteers came to me and said, give me a check for $1 million, and said, go buy the community center. So
well, that's impressive.
That is. We really wanted it to be in Lomita, right? Because I love Lomita.
Sure.
But we just couldn't find the space.
Yeah.
We couldn't find the place. So we opened it, like you said, at 190th and Crenshaw. We bought the building there and turned it into a community center, so we could keep going and doing all of the community outreach programs. So that's
and that's where community center. That's where the second one we were talking about. That's where you do healthy bags.
Right. Now, healthy bags came to be even before we bought the community center. Just before we bought it, actually. I remember at one of the staff meetings, I had told my staff that we're going to be feeding children. And I said, because God said to me, just like when he said, build my house, meaning the shelter for the women, he had said to me, feed my children.
Yeah.
And I remember saying to them, I'm a little confused about that, because we're already running the food pantry, but I know if he's saying it, it's going to happen. One of the other partnerships that we had at that time was we had a partnership with Torrance Memorial. Torrance Memorial had come.
I remember we talked about that.
Yeah, Torrance Memorial had come to us and said, the doctors, the pediatricians in the ER are really starting to notice a lot of children coming in with what they called failure to thrive issues.
Yeah.
And they wondered if we would partner with them, where we could, set up a health screening and assess how the families were doing. So we formed that partnership. It's grown so big now that we actually take over their entire conference center, and we have like 250 families going through, and they see doctors, dentists, psychologists.
That's good.
It's a really good program. But the first year that we did it with them, and they do full labs too, that full labs that they did, at the end of the day, we found that 27% of the school-age children that we were serving tested positive for anemia. Yeah. Now, my background in special ed goes, this is a big oh-oh. Yeah. Because anemia is a lack of oxygen to the brain, right? It's just not carrying the oxygen up to the brain. And so that means that these children were, at the very least, having brain fog and being pretty anemic, right? That's going to impede their ability to learn, and we all know that education is like the key to coming out of poverty. Sure. The other problem is that with long-term anemia, you can actually develop permanent cognitive impairments. Really? So these mean these children would always be special needs, right? At least have some severe learning disabilities. So that's where Healthy Bags came from, because we knew that we could treat this by getting nutritious foods to these families, because in the demographic study we did along with the health study, we found that these families were incredibly impoverished. Yeah. They're two-parent families, which are great. Both parents are working, but most of the parents we work with have very low education. Yeah. So they get very low-paying jobs, part-time jobs. So they can't afford a lot of times nutritious food. Nutritious food can be very expensive.
Yes.
So we decided to do the healthy bags, and we partnered with the local schools in Lomita and in Torrance. And by the time we got it up and running, we were delivering 220 bags every Friday to food insecure children that probably were going home to empty cupboards on Fridays. That program was so successful that the next year when we went back to Torrance Memorial, they went from 27% of the kids having anemia to 4%.
That's amazing.
I guess that's why God wanted me to feed
Oh
his
yeah,
kids.
that's real. I mean, just the medical. I mean, not only just nutritious food, but having the impact on the medical improvement. I know that anemia with lack of iron and stuff can be critical. I mean, it's critical in adults too.
Right.
But really bad in
it's
children.
bad for kids.
It's really hard for kids.
Especially in their development.
Yeah.
So we, that community center that we were able to build, right? We were running the healthy bags out of there. We also had our ESL, parenting, all of that running, and it was all going quite well. And then, bang, COVID hit.
Sure.
Right?
That's affected so much.
I know. We were all told to run it and shelter in place, right? It was kind of ironic because my staff team, we were sitting around and going, all right, what are we going to do now? And we were thinking, okay, we've never really had a good break to sit down and do some really good strategic planning. So we're thinking that's what we're going to do. Heck no. The phone started ringing off the hook. It was the social workers and the public health nurses from the schools, because now they're going, what are we going to do? These kids, they're not getting your healthy bags anymore, and now they're not getting the breakfast and lunch
breakfast,
right?
Sponsored breakfast.
Can you help? So rather than run to shelter in, we had to run the other way and really expand our healthy bags program. If God, if God brings you to something, He's going to provide. So about the same time, we got a phone call from something called Food Forward.
Oh yes, more of that.
Now, Food Forward is a food rescue system. Now, not only did schools close down, but so did all the restaurants, right?
Of course.
So there's all this thousands of pounds of fresh produce and food that needs to be housed. So our community center became a hub.
Okay.
And we still to this day, every Thursday, receive 15 to 18,000 pounds of fresh produce to our center.
Okay.
That not only allows us to provide fresh produce for all the families in our area, it's actually allowed us to form partnerships with 20 other food pantries in the area. So collectively, all of us together, we're actually able to take care of over 10,000 individuals a week. Now that's God impact.
Oh yes, most definitely.
And I think for our families, because we didn't just get Food Forward, we got the LA Food Bank, we got Food for Less, what was the other ones? Target, Baby to Baby, Smart and Final.
Okay.
So there is literally, and I took a look before I came over tonight, we get donated food valued at $1.5 million annually.
Wow.
It's a lot of food, and we have over 680 families registered with us for weekly groceries.
Yeah.
And we also have 153 seniors that are registered, homebound seniors that are registered with us. So that community center, rather than sort of being a learning center and the Healthy Bags delivery, is now turned into kind of COVID resource center. We have on Monday, we do all of our planning, right, for how we're going to orchestrate all this and organize all our volunteers. On Tuesday, we have what we call our seniors delivery. We have a bunch of volunteers come. I think you had Bonnie Arona.
We had Bonnie Arona on.
Right, she is one of our
earlier. Bonnie Arona was on one of our earlier interviews, and she had mentioned just how much enjoyment she has in doing the senior delivery for Community's Child. It's very, very pleasant.
We have 12 Bonnies.
Okay, good.
Right, 12 Bonnies. Yeah, because there's a lot of deliveries, right, that work with us. So they come on Tuesdays and they load up all the groceries and take them out to the seniors. The seniors, we actually did an assessment with the seniors. I sent out a 22 questionnaire.
Yes.
And this is where we could really use some support. and some help. Those seniors are incredibly isolated,
Yes.
lonely. It broke my heart to hear that some of them don't even have family members checking on them. So we've got a whole bunch of blank note cards that were donated to us, even if we can get volunteers just to write some
Yeah,
scripture.
Bonnie was mentioning that.
Yeah.
Just getting a written note
Means
is
so
such
much.
just amazing what changes.
They light up when our volunteers show up to deliver the meal, because that might be the only contact they're having
Yeah.
throughout the week. So there's so many different opportunities, and we actually just received some funding from the Pacern Foundation
Okay.
to actually provide items. Some of them, the families had little repairs they needed done right at their homes, or the
Oh yeah, that's right. They supply the material, but you need to supply the
I
labor.
need
You need
the
the
guys.
volunteers.
I need the
guys
volunteers to come
and do
in
the work.
and help. You know,
Hey, that's
some of
great.
the seniors in the handrails,
Sure.
right? Just different
Oh,
things.
there's a
and,
lot of people in the
There
churches
is.
in the construction industry.
Right.
That
you know, broken tap, changing a washer,
hey,
just
they know how to do that very well.
just simple
Yeah.
things. So that's definitely one of our goals.
Good.
And the cards. The cards are amazing. So that's our Tuesday, and then on Wednesday is the food bank delivers, and again, that's like probably 16 pallets of
Yeah.
food that come in. I know everybody thinks that when you have the LA Food Bank, you get all this food for free. I think I was sharing with
Yeah,
you
but
earlier
you
that
don't.
that's really not the case. Now, they're great, right? We do
Yeah.
get the sort of government food. It's free, but we have to pay for the delivery, and you pay
Yes.
by weight. And when
Sure.
you're getting 16 pallets coming in, that's a lot of weight.
It's
So
a cost.
it's a little bit of a cost.
Yeah.
And then they don't always have everything that we really want to provide the good nutrition, right?
Sure.
We don't want to see an anemia. We want to see people have really healthy immune systems.
Yeah.
So we will order, if the food bank has it, supplemental foods to go in, and we pay for that, maybe 50 cents on the dollar for
Okay.
that. And then the other thing is, when we don't have and we can't get it through the food bank, we will order like through Sam's Club or something like
Okay.
that, peanut butters and
Yeah.
tunas, things like that too. So all of that comes in on Wednesday. So we could use some volunteers to help us take those boxes, break it down, get everything onto the shelves. And then on Thursdays, we have a huge team. That's when our produce comes in. That's a lot of produce.
Yes.
And all of the different organizations come in, they pick up their produce.
Pick it
So
up.
helping with that. And then we have a bunch of volunteers that come in and they bag for our seniors
Okay.
for the delivery on Tuesday, and then we take the fresh produce and we put it in these safety bags that sort of lets the produce breeze, and that
Yeah.
goes into the big fridges. So there's 35 to 45 volunteers we need a week to do all
Yeah.
of this.
Are you getting that many
We are,
volunteers?
but people are starting to go back to work.
Okay, so you need some more help.
We need
Okay.
some more. We need some more volunteers. And then on Friday is when our families come.
Yes.
Right, and that's a drive-through. One of the things that I think is my favorite part of this is watching God work. The pandemic is not a good thing in any way. However, it has opened up the hearts to the families that we're working with to receive Christ.
Good.
When we first started,
That's a blessing.
it is a huge blessing. When we first started, maybe 60% were even interested in some form of prayer.
Uh-huh.
We're up to 90%.
Oh, that's
And
wonderful.
they're not only wanting prayer, they're giving us prayer requests and
Excellent.
lists.
Excellent.
So I could use some help with
You
those
can-
prayer
prayer
requests.
warriors, too.
Yes, we
Yes,
need some prayer
okay.
warriors. Also, we're starting to get to the point where churches are opening up again.
Okay.
And these families need to be churched.
Yes.
Yes, they have been now introduced to Christ, but we need people to come from different churches and to come and be part of where we pray with them
I need that fellowship. Yeah.
and fellowship and start forming some relationships and invite
Yes.
them to come to church, right? We have a chance here to get a harvest for
Good.
Christ and to bring it in, so that would be really nice too,
Oh, good.
right?
Well, you need some volunteers.
We do.
And obviously donations.
Donate
Obviously,
always
I mean,
donations.
it's nice that you're getting help from the organization.
We get a lot of food, but what
that's
we
good.
really do need,
But there's
we
money
need
to
fund-
run it.
we need
I
money
mean,
to run it. There's,
you can't. Just
yeah.
the food.
our
can't just-
operational costs are low. It's
You
10%,
still got- I know,
but we
but
still
you still
need
gotta-
that 10%.
you gotta move that food.
Right, we do.
Okay.
And when your budget with all that food and all that we're doing is close to like $2 million now,
Yeah.
right? So it's a good $200,000 a year to
Yeah,
run
yeah.
our programs, and then the women and children that we house, right?
Yes.
Like, I think I was telling you it's about $250 a month to house a family.
Yes.
That's really cheap, but it's still $250
Sure.
we need for each family that we're housing, and prayer.
Yes.
We could always
very
use
much
prayer. I think I was sharing with you earlier, if you're going to stand up and run with Christ, because literally he moves ahead of me. I just put the running shoes on. You see, I've got them on, and I just run behind him, trying to fulfill his missions. And I don't know. It's we need prayer, because when you're moving for Christ and you're bringing people to Christ, the enemy doesn't like you much.
Oh.
So there's a lot of challenges.
Understand that.
A lot of
Understand
challenges.
that.
So
Understand that. Yeah.
prayers are always great.
Now, in an earlier talk we had, you have some event coming up on Saturday or something?
We do. And it's a lot of fun. So
Yeah.
everybody should come. And it's close. It's just on Pacific Coast Highway. It's DCH Toyota on Pacific Coast Highway, just past Crenshaw on the right-hand
Okay,
side. It's from 11 to 2. It's a drive-through, and your kids are going to get all this wonderful Easter stuff. Torrance Memorial just donated all this Hello Kitty stuff for us to give out to.
Oh, really?
There's hot dogs and all that stuff. And what we're asking you to do as you come through, either bring some canned foods that we can add to our pantry.
Yes,
right?
excellent.
Or we would really like you to consider donating jump rope, hula hoop, side wig chalk,
yes,
which
for
is
the
all stuff you can
kids.
pick up at the dollar store. It's cheap.
Sure.
But we're working, one of our goals for 2021 is a lot of the kids from these low-income families, a lot of stressors when both parents aren't working. They're trying to do Zoom. We've got a lot of anxiety, depression.
Oh, I can imagine.
A lot of mental health issues for the kids. We've got a great team of Christian counselors that we're working with, and we're just going to do some counseling. But part of that is doing some physical activity with the skip rope and the hula hoops and drawing to bring the kids out. So
Good.
we could use some help with that.
I think you were also mentioning it'd be nice to you could use some tutors for some of the kids,
Absolutely.
because they're really COVID has really hurt their learning.
It really
curves,
has
too.
hurt.
Yeah.
One of the things I think I was sharing with you as well is we were really blessed to form this relationship with something called the Laptop Elf. Right, the Laptop Elf was taking in all these laptops, refurbishing them, and then putting the Zoom on there, which are really great, because the kids needed to do the Zoom classes, and all of the sort of LA Unified school districts got the Chromebooks.
Yeah.
But they kind of forgot about Torrance.
Okay.
Because I think everybody thought that the kids in Torrance were fine, but we have 40% of our families are in Torrance.
Yeah.
So we were actually able to provide those laptops and some training. I think one of your young fellows, Josh here, came in and helped us teach some of the Zoom stuff. So we are going to be doing Zoom to start with these kids, and they have really fallen behind. So if we've got some people that are interested in doing some Zoom tutoring,
excellent,
that would be amazing, just amazing. You name it, we have a volunteer opportunity for it. When you're working with this many families, you have a lot of volunteer opportunities. And I always say, and I think Bonnie shared that too, that you will get way more out of giving than you will ever know.
Yeah.
Because you change lives and you light up people's lives. And it's so great to see that you're just being present, the transformation that can make for people.
Okay, excellent.
Right, yeah.
Oh, good. Well, anybody that would like to volunteer for Communities Child, they're on the web. Just go to communitieschild, I guess .com. But anyway, just type in Communities Child, and the website will come up. And their phone number, give them a call. They'd obviously love to help you. They really can use a lot of volunteers, a variety of these, the tutoring, the healthy bags, the workers helping. They've got the material to help the living arrangements for the seniors, but they need the workers to do it. So there are all sorts of volunteer opportunities available in the Communities Child. And Tara, I'd like to thank you for bringing this. It's nice to see such a local organization that has done so well and has reached out. When outreach is so important now, and so many of the churches too. Helping the community. And this is a local that's really outdone itself.
It's crazy. When God first called me to building that house, right?
Yeah.
I thought I was going to be working with maybe 20 people a year. Last year, I think I was sharing with you the report we got from the LA Food Bank was that we touched 11,700 households with over 37,000 individuals.
It's amazing.
Right? That's the impact of God.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That's the impact of God.
Anyway.
Yeah.
So anyway, again, I thank Tara for coming, and I appreciate all the time and the talk about Community's Child. If you're there and willing to help and look to volunteer, this is an excellent opportunity for you. And I'd like to thank you for attending tonight and listening in. And Richard Doré, and again, this is the Let's Talk Live from the Harbor Church, and we will see you again next Wednesday. God bless you.